So, Chapter 7, Lesson 1, Boom and Bust, begins with the boom that we know as the Roaring Twenties. We also call it the Jazz Age because it was a time heavily influenced by the music that came out of Harlem, jazz music. And we're going to look at a few people that we have to know, all of them in some sense an artist, musicians, writers, and painters. Some of them come out of Harlem, some of them don't. So we'll just take a look at them and some of their work. This is Georgia O'Keeffe. She's an artist known for urban scenes and later paintings of the Southwest. When you see her paintings, you can see that a lot of them are, whoops, that was fast. A lot of her paintings have this look of the Southwest with the skulls, the background, somewhat realistic looking, somewhat not. That one, pretty realistic. I guess same for that one too. But she also is known for these urban landscapes. These are different periods in her life. This one is the, I guess it's called Street New York, #1. This is the Radiator Building at night in New York. Then she's known for these. This is probably what she's more famous for, is her flower paintings. It's another period in her life. And the Red Poppy, this one probably her most famous painting. Jacob Lawrence is our other painter. This one is part of the Harlem Renaissance. A painter who chronicled the experiences of the Great Migration through art. So the Great Migration is a period of time when African Americans are leaving the South because of Jim Crow, because of segregation, but they're also just leaving because the South isn't industrialized. They were heavily traumatized by the Civil War, so that there's not many jobs down there, and that's why they're going up north to more segregation, more racism, but there are more jobs. So his paintings, Jacob Lawrence, is showing a lot of that. So here we have people, filling into train stations, going to Chicago, New York, St. Louis. Not only showing the movement, but also what they encounter. So this one's meant to show the unfairness of courts against African Americans. This one showing some of the race riots that did take place in cities like Chicago. Again, not very realistic like Georgia O'Keeffe's, but it does kind of show the emotion, the feeling, the anger in there. This one's showing some of the segregation that is still found, or that was still found in the North. So even though you're leaving Jim Crow, you are still going up to places that are still segregated. This one's showing that some of the people who have been more established in the North actually were not very welcoming of other African Americans. So African Americans not always welcoming of African Americans coming from the South. But his paintings also do a good job of showing a lot of the vibrancy and the happiness of the Jazz Age. So this is just one of my favorite paintings of his, showing a street in Harlem, a lot of the color, a lot of the life, and even though it's not very realistic, it does kind of, you can imagine the feeling, the emotion in that painting. Showing schools in the North, the fact that they're going from schools that are much worse in the South to better opportunities up in the North. He also has this war series where he's showing the African American experience in World War II. This is a big moment in African American history when many African Americans are seeing that they're valuable to their country, and then they come home and they see how they're treated, or they see that they're fighting against Hitler and Hitler's racism, and then they're coming home to more racism. So this is a big turning point in the civil rights movement, World War II, and he's trying to show a lot of that experience in this series. Langston Hughes, a poet of the Harlem Renaissance, combined the experiences of African and American cultural roots. This is one of his more famous poems, A Dream Deferred, in a Nike commercial.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore, then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a silken sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode?
Now, I think Nike had their own interpretation of that poem. I think more commonly it was taken as the if you defer a dream, if you don't let somebody chase their dream, it may explode in several ways. It could explode in the race riots that sometimes happen. It could explode in somebody doing something very powerful in a good way. It's just that's what makes it, I guess, a good poem. Is you can interpret it several ways. F. Scott Fitzgerald, a novelist who wrote about the jazz age of the 1920s, famous book, The Great Gatsby. So this is looking at kind of the party lifestyle of the jazz age. Fitzgerald kind of saw the Great Depression coming. He saw all this partying happening and thought at some point this has to crash, this has to end, but most of his famous writing is about the boom leading up to the bust. We'll look at him a little more in class. And this is John Steinbeck, another novelist, but he's writing about a different part of American life. He's actually coming more into the bust period, or the Depression period. He's writing a lot about the migrant workers, people who were hit hardest by the Depression. So Fitzgerald writing about the party among the wealthy, Steinbeck writing about the poor. His famous book is The Grapes of Wrath, a story about Tom Joad, and we'll look a little more about that in class too. Duke Ellington. This is someone we associate with the Harlem Renaissance, although he's native to Washington, D.C., or from Washington, D.C. A jazz musician. Look at two jazz musicians. Duke Ellington, famous big band leader. This is his, one of his more famous songs, Take the A Train. So if you're choosing between classical music or more traditional music and this, if you're a young person at the time, you're probably going to choose this. So it's very upbeat, very crowd pleasing. Next we have Louis Armstrong, a jazz musician, another big band, another band leader, but he dealt with a little bit of a smaller sound. Now, this isn't really typical of some of his music, but this is probably his most famous song.
Here's one of our late records we like to play for you now, folks. And it's a beautiful number called What a Wonderful World. I see trees of green, red. Just
ignore the Vietnam scenery in the background. This song was kind of brought back in the 80s with a song we called Good Morning Vietnam, but that was kind of bringing back a famous song again.
I see skies of blue.
Bessie Smith, a famous blues singer. So Bessie Smith, maybe not as famous among people today, but she actually made the first music video. And she's somebody who would have been at the time a pretty controversial person. Here she is drinking a nice bottle of water, which would have been pretty controversial at the time for a woman to be so openly honest about her water drinking habits. So when we hear artists today who are speaking honestly about their life and what they deal with and how they're being treated, this is one of the first women who's doing that, who's talking about sometimes abuse that she's suffered, bad habits she's had. It's just very honest, kind of a coming before rap music. Rap music owes a lot to a woman like this, who's bringing a lot of honesty out in her music. George Gershwin, a composer who wrote what we know as uniquely American music. So when you compare his music to a lot of classical music, his stuff sounds like it definitely comes out of America. It has a very busy New York City kind of sound. Here's one of his more famous songs, Rhapsody in Blue. This was a version done by the movie Fantasia. So it's actually pretty good imagery showing you the New York City skyline. That's kind of how the music feels. And when the music kind of builds up here, we get that feeling of morning in a city. We'll look a little more at this in class. Whoops, I shouldn't have clicked it there. I missed the big build. Aaron Copland, another composer who wrote uniquely American music. So these two guys, when you hear their sound, it definitely sounds American. His version of America kind of often has that, rather than that big city sound, has that Western sound. Here's Appalachian Spring.
When we first hear Simple Gifts, it's so slow. It's almost unconscious.
I apologize. I'm going to skip past this.
And then
Here we go. Ho down. So if you compare this to a lot of other classical music coming out of Europe, this one definitely sounds like it comes out of America. All right, I think that should wrap us up. We'll look at, again, more of the work from these guys in class, but that'll do it for now.